Okay, I noticed the phenomena on social media platforms, and that is the de facto alliance of two different school of thoughts that were one day arch enemies, but the Ukraine war has both sides on the same page. These two sides are the neocons and the woke community, who agree on escalation and reject any negotiating settlement between Ukraine and Russia. Now, maybe some people would ask, what is the woke and what is the neoconservatism, right? Because it is, for some people, it's not really clear. So before we jump into the details of this video, let me share with you what woke actually means. So woke is an English adjective meaning alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. Beginning in the 2010s, it came to encompass a broader awareness of social inequalities such as sexism and has also been used as shorthand for American left ideas involving identity politics and social justice, such as the notion of white privilege and slavery reparations for African Americans. Now, I know what wokeism means, or at least I know the people who are woke on the social media platforms, and you can see that they believe in identity politics, they believe in gender politics, they believe in racial segregation between people. Actually, in my opinion, I dislike wokeism, although I come from the Middle East, and I think the woke people are dividing the societies on ethnic, religious, color basis, racial basis, and this is a divide and conquer strategy by the people who are behind the woke community or the woke movement. And this is a perfect strategy, in my opinion, for electoral purposes. And the Democratic Party uses this, I would say, strategy in order to gain the votes of the black community, of the Latinos, of the minorities, etc., and the Muslims, for example, etc., etc. And on the other hand, we have the neocons, right? The neocons are completely different school of thought. It's a political movement that was born in the United States during the 1960s among liberal hawks who became disenchanted with the increasingly pacifist foreign policy of the Democratic Party and with the growing new left and counterculture of the 1960s, particularly the Vietnam protests. Some also began to question their liberal beliefs regarding domestic policies such as the Great Society. Neoconservatives typically advocate the promotion of democracy and interventionism in international affairs, including peace through strength, which means military means, and are known for espousing disdain for communism and political radicalism. Prominent neoconservatives in the George W. Bush administration included Paul Wolfowitz, Elliot Abrams, Richard Pearl, and Paul Bremer. While not identifying as neoconservatives, senior officials such as Vice President Dick Cheney and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld listed closely to neoconservative advisors regarding foreign policy, especially the defense of Israel and the promotion of American influence in the Middle East. Many of its adherents became politically influential during the Republican presidential administrations in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, peaking in influence during the administration of George W. Bush, when they played a major role in promoting and planning the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Critics of neoconservatism have used the term to describe foreign policy and war hawks who support aggressive militarism and neo-imperialism. So as you can see, these are two different and antagonistic schools of thought. However, in the recent case of Ukraine, we can see that these both sides are becoming closer to each other, and both sides are calling for interventionism, militarism, and they're ridiculing any voices who are calling for negotiated settlement, for example, between Ukraine and Russia, or peace and lasting peace between the both sides. Now, personally, I remember the statement of George W. Bush 2 decades ago, when he used to say, "You are either with us or you're against us. There is no in between," right? Now, the same rhetoric is adopted nowadays by the woke, so-called woke community, but with different terminologies. Now they're saying, if you advocate for diplomacy and negotiated settlement, then you are a Putin apologist and must be put on the Ukraine's kill list, or you're probably on the payroll of the Kremlin. Now, this online defamation is very similar to the neocons' rhetoric when they used to silence anti-war Americans by calling them traitors. And this is especially in 2001 and 2003. But in the age of social media, in my opinion, it is easier to cancel peace advocates and allow the radicals to take over the online scene, right? And push for dangerous scenarios from their comfortable places far away, thousands of miles away from the war zones. Now, people need to understand that the only difference between ending the war now with negotiated settlement or with diplomacy and ending the war later, the only difference is that the number of the Ukrainians is the number of the Ukrainian and the Russian people who will die in the course of this war. It's the same outcome. At the end, there will be a peaceful or negotiated settlement, but the only difference is how many people will die. So, but also, in order to push for a peaceful settlement or lasting peaceful settlement, the signature of the politicians is not enough. And we need to prepare the popular bases of both sides, Russia and Ukraine, to live with each other again as they used to be. And hence, online diplomacy on Twitter, on Facebook, etc., is also needed. So we need to de-escalate the tensions on the social media platforms and prepare both sides for a negotiated settlement, and so that both sides can also accept that they can live together again when a peace agreement is being signed. Now, in this regard, I would like to bring your attention. So my printer just decided that it has to make some noises. I don't know why. Anyways, in this regard, actually, Jeffrey Sachs, he published a wonderful article the other day titled "The Neocons and the Woke Left are joining hands and leading us to woke War 3." And I made some notes. I would like to go through this article because I think it's very important for us to understand this online phenomenon that I mentioned. So, Twitter hive mind is using the same intolerant cancellation tactics that they use to shut down debate on domestic political issues in order to shape US policy towards Ukraine. They are doing so by demonizing dissent, defaming opponents, and closing off as ideologically unacceptable any path to peace or even de-escalation. The online mob has decided that any support for a negotiated settlement, even proposals that Zelensky himself appeared to support at the beginning of the war, is tantamount to taking Russia's side, denouncing voices of compromise and restraint as Putin apologists. This removes them from acceptable discourse and shrinks the overtone window to those advocating the total defeat of Russia and then end to Putin's regime, even if it risks World War III. We've seen this before. Woke mobs on Twitter routinely demonize and defame their political opponents, impugn, I don't know what does that mean, impugn the motives of anyone who questions their goals or tactics, and squelch dissent even in their own ranks by declaring the debate on certain topics over. What makes the I Stand with Ukraine version of the Twitter mob unique is that it brings together two forces that used to be sworn enemies of one another, the woke left and the neoconservative right. It turns out they share many of the same loathsome ideological and personality traits and have a similar slash and burn approach to political engagement. It's a new political marriage. Very well very well said, very well written, very eloquent. I have never read anything about this author. I'm not sure what are his positions on other issues, but this explanation is so true, and you can see on social media, especially on Twitter, the mobs from both sides, the radicals from the right and from the left, or the neoconservatives and these woke people are putting hand in hand to silence the opposition to this war, the dissent for this craziness that is driving this war, fueling this war, right? And they are defaming and committing character assassination against anyone who refuses to walk on this path and is calling for sanity and is calling for diplomacy to end this war. And as I mentioned, the only difference is now or later, just the number of people who will die. And these people, the radicals who are calling for escalation, they don't give a damn about the Ukrainian people or the Russian people. And these people are responsible. And also, in my opinion, they are increasing the tensions and they are delaying the uh, settlement between Ukraine and Russia. Just over a decade ago, former President Barack Obama defeated Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary to become president, due in no small part to his opposition to the Iraq War. At the time, the left despised neocon hawks for pushing the Bush-Cheney administration's disastrous forever wars in the Middle East. Moreover, the left supported Obama in his policy toward Ukraine when he refused to escalate with Russia over Crimea, pointing out that America has no vital security interests in Ukraine, though Russia does. But since neoconservatives largely walked out of the Republican Party over Trump and disavowed all of their conservative domestic policy views to become commentators on MSNBC, the left has discovered a new love for interventionist foreign policy as long as it serves democracy and opposes autocracy, an increasingly malleable term that both the woke and the neocons now use to define not just Putin but also democratically elected leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and Donald Trump in the United States. I totally agree. Look, I have big differences in my convictions or my what I believe in with like Orban or Meloni or Trump. However, these people came to power after democratic elections, and this woke mob that call these leaders as dictators, fascists, racists, etc., etc. It is not because these people are these things, but only because they disagree with them on an ideological and political level. And any other person, like let's say Hillary Clinton came to power now and she invades another country again, this woke mob aren't going to say anything about Hillary Clinton and her fascist foreign policies, for example. Their um, comments on fascism is only exclusive to people that they disagree with. But if there is a person from their side and this person is practicing also fascism on other sides of the world and forcing other countries to accept their own way of life, their culture, their foreign policy, etc., you will not see these people calling Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama fascist, for example. This shift is disorienting, but on a purely tactical level, it makes a certain amount of sense. Neocons invented the cancellation game before there was even a Twitter board on which to play it. Neocons arrogantly dismiss the other side's point of view as argued in bad faith and not worth considering, and label anyone who dares question the cause as a heretic or traitor. David Frum set the neocon standard for this tactic when he branded the small number of pundits on the right who opposed the Iraq War as unpatriotic conservatives at the outset of the strategic disaster. Fast forward to today, and anyone who suggests that NATO expansion could have been a contributing factor to the current Ukraine crisis, or that the sanctions imposed on Russia are not working and have backfired on a soon-to-be shivering Europe, or even that the US must prioritize avoiding a world war with a nuclear-armed Russia, is denounced as Putin's putsch. Warping the debate in this way allows delusional and contradictory thinking to go unchallenged. This is very important. You have to listen to this. Thus, we get the argument that Putin is a madman who will kill indiscriminately to achieve his aims, but he's also somehow definitely bluffing about using nuclear weapons, and he is only using that bluff because he's losing the war. But if he is not stopped in Ukraine, he will go on to conquer the rest of Europe. I mean, I have seen this plenty of times on Twitter. People, the same person, the same individual, the same activist, the same journalist who keeps ridiculing the power of Russia and says Russia is out of missiles and they're no more having missiles, they don't know how to fight, they're losing the war, etc. The same guy or the same woman, the second day or the third day, he or she says that, oh, if we don't win in Ukraine, then Putin will conquer the entire Europe. I mean, Russia is either so strong that can conquer the entire Europe, or it's not strong enough and it's weak that doesn't have enough rockets and missiles to conquer Ukraine itself. So it can't be both, but it's happening somehow on social media. So he says it's nonsensical. And the real debate would expose some of the delusions in this thinking. But we aren't allowed to have one. As long as this woke neocon alliance is allowed to set the terms of the debate, we will continue to see a one-way ratchet toward greater and more dangerous escalation of this conflict. There will be no peaceful resolution to this conflict that America doesn't at least have a hand in negotiating, and we should be leading the effort. Instead, we've been deferring to the Ukrainians and their maximalist demands, upping the sanctions on Russia as Putin ups his rhetoric against the West. So, this is also very important, guys. Someone blew up the Nord Stream pipeline just in case another key nation, such as Germany, had any thoughts about coming to the bargaining table. And I wonder who that country might be, because, in my opinion, the lasting peace in Europe is possible when Germany and Russia get along, have a very good relations on all the levels, and they merge their economies and have mutual interests together. And only then you will see strong, independent Europe, a peaceful Europe where both sides can interact and live together. But it is just that one country who is leading this empire and knows that this empire is crumbling and nowadays is tarnishing any chances for peaceful settlement or rapprochement between Europe and especially Germany and Russia. And guess who that country is? A regional war turned into the First World War because all parties made maximalist demands and assured others were bluffing. It can happen again, especially if the media, social media, and foreign policy elite join forces and use war cancellation tactics to preclude discussion of any alternatives. Right now, we are locked on an escalatory path, and the destination ahead is Woke War 3. And this article went so viral on social media and especially on Twitter that the term Woke War 3, you can go and check yourself, is trending now in the United States and in Europe. And I think it's very important for the people to understand how these cancellation tactics occur and who is playing this game, the woke and the neocons, and what are the objectives. So we addressed all this in this video. I think it was very important to share this with you. I have learned from it, so I'm sharing this with you. And I think if you believe in what I say, we should play a constructive role on social media. We should de-escalate. We should use our online diplomacy between the Ukrainians and the Russians and bring both sides closer in order to pave the way for a negotiated settlement. Otherwise, the alternative is not good for the entire humanity. Do you think it's worth destroying our race as humans because of a war on Ukraine? Because some power-thirsty, blood-thirsty maniacs, they don't want to share their power and privilege with the rest of the world, and they want to keep it exclusive to them? Do you think it's worth it because of a few warmonger, crazy people who are driving us into extinction? If you think it's not worth it, then we have to pursue the calmer approach on social media in order to decrease the tensions between the popular bases, as I mentioned, the Russians and the Ukrainians, so that the peace process would be fruitful. And it is coming sooner or later. There will be talks, unless the crumbling empire thinks it's not worth sharing the privileges they used to enjoy in the past decades, and now they want to blow up the entire universe into our faces, so that if they are perishing as an empire, they would perish us with them too. I've been your host, Kirak Almasian of Syriana Analysis. If you like my reporting, please subscribe and hit the like button. It's a great help. And I'm very thankful and grateful for all the donors, supporters of Syriana Analysis who are supporting me financially. There are so many means, guys, you can support me. All the links are in the description below. I'm very thankful and grateful for all of you, and see you next time.